Generally, I'm a very soft-spoken guy, at least in my mind. My wife doesn't agree, but today I'm going to try and make her right, which is what all good husbands should do. But I'm here to talk about quiet. Earlier in our meditation, I was introducing people to the notion that meditation should be something that you start and do it in short segments so that you can learn to master it and then make it shorter and shorter and shorter until the difference between meditation and everyday life disappears. Now, the point of that is you are absolutely perfection. And I don't mean that your habits are great, that you have a Hollywood appearance or any of that. What I mean is that your inherent nature is perfect. And that's not how we perceive ourselves. I think each and every one of us has a darker view of ourselves than that. We see ourselves in comparison to the way we're supposed to be. Just look at the television. None of us look like that. You know, we get a commercial, and the commercials are all telling us in some subtle way that if only we did this, then we would be better. We might become perfect. As if there was something you now don't have, that if you had it, you would be perfect. Now, it's very difficult to get out of this conversation. How many of you have noticed when you try to meditate, that conversation goes on anyway? Everybody notice that you do have a conversation going on in your head all the time. No matter how hard you're trying, there's something telling you you're not going to quite make it, that you're not quite good enough. And we have an act, we have an outward presentation that tries to deny that and tries to quiet that noise, but it never really stops. Now, welcome to the human race. Part of being human is having that conversation going on that tries to have you conform to the herd so that you won't stand out. In early days when we were more herd animals, it was a survival trait to stay with the herd. And one of the survival traits of the herd is to push everybody who's different out because difference makes uncertainty. And uncertainty leads to possible death. How many of you are afraid of dying? Come on, tell me. I never met anybody so old that they weren't afraid of dying young. Because wherever age I am today, that's young. I'm not really in a hurry. Now, frankly, I am no longer afraid of dying, but most of my life I lived it in mortal fear that if I did it wrong, somehow it would be the end of it. Then somewhere along the way, I discovered me. Now, developing an inner life means to step back. Because the truth is, your inner life is out here. The self that you are is out here. The world you see, that's yourself. Because it comes from yourself. The world you're seeing has been created by your own mind, and what you're seeing is what your mind is demonstrating. But to be able to make any difference in it, you need to be able to step aside, to move away from this. Not because this is any more unreal, or this is any more inside is any more real, but because it's different. It's an opportunity to step into the creative space. Now, one of the things we can do is to meditate. One of the points of meditation is you develop this space I call witness. It doesn't have an evaluation of what you see. It doesn't have an already existing picture of what should be. It merely notices what is, without judgment, without explanation, without meaning. It merely is present. And that's what witness means, right? To be present. If I witness something, I'm present to it. How many of you notice that there are people in your life that you have a different opinion about than the other people that know them?
I do.
And has a different opinion about himself.
I agree. I don't agree. I agree.
And we mentioned our
That's the thing. What happens is that we all play different roles in different people's stories. It's not that you in my life have any distinct quality that's actually you. All the qualities I see about you are ones I've projected onto you. So what I say about you tells me nothing about you, but it tells me a lot about me. So the point of the inner life is to start to develop that place where you start to see what you're creating out here. What role I'm playing in the world that I'm seeing. Now, how do I do that? How many of you have a spiritual practice of some kind? See, it could be anything. Holy can be a spiritual practice for all I know. I mean, for any one person, anything could be that. I want you to understand there's no right spiritual practice for this. There's a process that you take to step outside of your everyday life and to be present to some quality of self that you can't really define. It's like an empty space you step into. Some people call it getting in the zone. I used to run, and I'd get in the zone just from running. Usually about the time I broke my wind, my mind would stop. Up until that time, I was busy creating and solving problems that for companies that didn't exist, because I'm a problem solver. That's kind of my active life. I'm a problem solver. So I would be running and I'd be solving problems, and suddenly I would break through and I would be nothing. And I'd just be running and the day would be there. That's kind of how I discovered this space, actually. It wasn't any of this spiritual workshops that I took. It was running. I discovered it one day. I realized, hey, when I'm running, I get to this place. And in this place, everything's beautiful. Of course, it helped that I was running along the coast in Monterey. And so I was looking at seals and sea lions and things like that. So I had the appearance of beautiful, but it was a reinforcement of something that I had experienced over and over again in my life, where I broke through into a place where suddenly everything was beautiful. And I've slowly come to understand what that is. That's that place when I get out of my way. When I step into my quiet space. And it's quiet not because the world is quiet. It's quiet because I'm no longer listening to that conversation. That conversation for a moment or two, it's just ceased to be. So how do I start to develop this? Because it's not something that seems to happen naturally. Now, I was reminded as I was driving here today, thinking about what I was going to say of a parable from the Bible. And some people were coming to Jesus and saying, hey, how should I pray? Joe over here, he gets up and he goes to the front of the temple and he prays really loudly every Saturday night. Every Sabbath he's there praying really loudly. Is that how I should pray? And Jesus said, no, go into a closet to pray. Now, we all know these people. I call them public Christians. Now, it doesn't matter what faith you are. I just happen to be raised Christian, so that's how I see it. But they're always going on about how holy they are, demonstrating it through the words that we see. They're also the first to tell you the worst thing about your neighbor. They're the first ones to point a finger at somebody else. For some reason, always some reason that's justifiable. Prove it in the Bible. You're going to point right through the line that says it. Here it is, X. And they'll point it, and that's it. Not very inner. pointed it out mostly because I wanted you to understand this work has to be done alone. One of the common elements in all kinds of spiritual paths is a consciousness of solitude, of being one, being solo, being alone. The hardest thing in the world to be is to be alone with yourself and start to realize that all of the hills that you see out there have a source closer to home. When you're by yourself, there's no one to blame. There's no other cause. There's only you. Now, most of us avoid this like the plague. But if you want to develop an inner life, you have to embrace it. You have to start to seek it out. Sometimes you'll seek it out in the middle of a crowd. How many of you have felt it, being alone in the middle of a crowd? Yeah, y'all know how to get there. But we get there and we get there in fear. We get there in resistance. We get there because we don't want to be there. And we notice that we're there and we do everything we can not to have that experience. To develop your inner life, you really have to embrace that. You don't have to live there. I'm not saying to go there and be there all the time. You have to embrace that moment. You have to be willing to be with yourself. You know, your spiritual practice can be anything. I recommend if you're starting out and you don't know one, take spiritual mind treatment. I use spiritual mind treatment for 3 years as my spiritual practice, almost exclusively because it was easy and it worked really quick. It helped me get to that point. In spiritual mind treatment, we start to create this place where we recognize there's only one God. There's only one existence, one source of all life. And that source of life is here as me. I'm not separated from it. And as soon as I identify with that greater idea of self, I'm in a place where I can be with you and not feel alone, but feel soul, feel solace, being at peace with you. You see, because that's the underlying bugaboo that we're all fighting with, is that somehow we're insufficient, somehow we're not enough, somehow we're less than. And when I join up with that which is, the source of all, then I can't be less than because I'm all of it. It's all of me. I'm all it. And in that recognition, I step out of my story. And in that moment, all things are possible. How many of you think you have some limitations? Who said so? Somebody, right? Somebody told you. You didn't? Yeah. Mostly, no matter who told you, you agreed. You bought in, you signed on. Those limitations go with your story. They will go with the story that you tell yourself you are. The more you identify with that story, the more those limitations apply. How many of you have really struggled to change some of those things? Yeah. The thing is, you can't change it inside the story. The characters in a movie that you see, they can't suddenly decide to be something else. There's a script. They're following the script. The actors follow the script. And they deliver what's in the script. That's why they're called actors. We're all actors. We're all living a script. It's a script that we may not have written, but we signed off on. We agreed to play the part. And the only way you can renegotiate this contract is to step out of it for a moment. And to step out of it, you have to create that place to step to. When I was younger, I really thought the world was going to hell in a handbasket. I didn't think that I would do this old. not to say how old that is, but it's old enough that I actually probably saw that movie. But the world is the world. It continues to go on. No matter how soon I think it's going to end, it doesn't seem to. No matter how bad I think it's gotten, it seems to be able to get worse. And even no matter how bad it gets, I find places of beauty and joy and peace. Now, those have always been available for everybody. I don't think I've read anything in history where anybody thought the world was getting better. No matter who I read in history, they're always thinking the younger generation is going to be the end of it all. That they're leading us to hell in a hurry. That the whole generation of next comers is going to destroy civilization. Now, strangely enough, over time, they have. Over and over again, civilizations have fallen. And guess what? Out of the ashes of the old come the new. Over and over again, a new civilization arises. That's really the hope. It's not that we've got it right and that younger people are going to tear it apart. It's that it's already falling apart. And they're looking for a new way to do it before it's beyond repair. In our lives, we're both old and new. Like I said, nobody ever gets too old not to die young. That all of us have that youth upwelling in us. That new wanting to be expressed, seeking to be shown and demonstrated and recognized. And at the same time, we all live inside this crumbling shell of a story that's falling apart. See, new thought is really about this notion that if you have a new thought, you'll create a new condition. That the circumstances of our lives are not inherently necessary. Now you can see that it happens all the time. That's what Hollywood keeps us going with, is that some miraculous thing happens and somebody has a life that's just changed overnight. Unfortunately for most of them, because they didn't change their story, they're not too long away from being back to a similar situation, similar story that they were in before. That the circumstances changing didn't really change their lives. But every once in a while, somebody has a personal transformation and they become a new person. I saw a story on the news this morning, actually it was on Sunday morning, about somebody who was wrongfully convicted and imprisoned for 46 years. And while they were in prison, they decided to turn them, instead of just marking X's on the store, getting harder and stronger and meaner, they took up art and started painting. And in his 46 years, he really sort of mastered his art. And when it was proven that he was innocent and they released him, which is not all that common. A lot of people die innocent in jail. It's not, life isn't fair. It's not really ever was fair. It's trying to become fair. And maybe that's what our role is. When he got out, they gave him the money for it. So, sorry, our mistake. And so what did he have? He took his art out and was, it's like selling your children. But he had to sell his art, but he decided to do it in a show. So he had an art show, and suddenly he became one of the newest, hottest items in the art world. And the funny thing is, the transformation didn't happen when that happened. The transformation happened while he was in prison. And he decided that rather than have his life be about the bitterness of the injustice he was confronted with, he was going to put his energy and his attention into what he could imagine and draw. And when he got out, he said, life is too short to spend any time in your sin. I'll tell you right now, no matter where you're at in your life is too short to be paying taxes to those you fear. Life is too short to be paying taxes to those that have done you wrong. It's an old story. When I was at a Buddhist monastery studying, that the monks told. It was about 2 monks who were in, I can't remember the word, but they were journeying. Because in the old traditions, how monks made it, they went out and they begged. And they were out and they had to take these vows and these vows, or they would hold themselves separate from the rest of the world, except for their begging and praying. These 2 monks met a woman who was trying to cross the river, but she was too infirm. And so one of the monks said, "Here, I'll give you a hand," picked her up, carried her across the river, set her down, and then they went continued on their way. About 10 miles later, the other monk turned to him and said, "I can't believe that you let yourself be defiled by touching that woman." He said, "Are you still carrying her? I set her down 10 miles ago." Today, right now, where we're at, we have the possibility of stepping into a quiet zone. Of stepping into a place that's, we call it within, but it's really, no, it's without. I step into a space without my story. I step into a space without my justifications for why life looks this way. I step into a space where I don't have to defend who I've been or who I'm going to be next. And in that space, choice exists. I can choose who to be, regardless of the story I've been living up until now. Regardless of the circumstances that I find myself, I can choose who to be. The funny thing is that when we step back into life being already, life has a tendency to whip itself around to reflect that. Circumstances change. People's personalities change. The people that we know so closely show up differently. Strangers that we never would have approached become close. The possibility of moving into a different arena than we ever considered shows up. And the life that we're living shows up here the way we've chosen to be. So we were looking for a simple way of explaining our teaching. That's our teaching in a nutshell. You step out of your story and choose a new story to live. The life around you will change to reflect the story you've chosen. You don't have to fix anything. You don't have to go back and try to change anybody else in your life. You don't even have to change jobs. Although frequently that might happen if you're in a place that's not a good fit. You step out, choose, step back. Life changes. My one word of advice. I'm looking at the clock because I'm always run my talks based on the clock, and that one hasn't moved since I started talking.
You have 7 hours left.
My one piece of advice is learn to trust yourself. You may not have any evidence to say that's a good idea. You may not have any agreement with the people around you that that's a good idea. But you need to learn to trust that somewhere inside of you, you do know. And when it feels like this is the thing to do right now, trust it. And be aware that in that moment, an idea might occur, an observation might occur, an opportunity might arise that will change everything for you. You see, the point of our spiritual journey is not to get somewhere. There is no holy place at the end of this journey. There are opportunities along the way for you to be holy. Holy you. Holy present. Embrace it, you should. Know that we're here to continually evolve and expand this world that we see. Knowing that it really is just a creation of our minds, what we see. The world exists in a whole other dimension than our senses will perceive. And this dimension of our perception is very changeable. We want to grow with it and expand with it, so that in truth we come to realize the perfection that we already are. That this is not a journey of getting better, but a journey of discovering and expressing that perfection. Thank you for your time this morning.
Thank you.